Hello, good afternoon, or good morning, everyone, depending on where you're tuning in. Thank you so much for joining us for episode 11 of season 3 of Black Writers Read. My name is Nicole Young Martin, and I serve as a producer and host of this series. I'm back after a fairly long hiatus. I haven't live streamed since like late January. Taking time off during Black History Month from the live stream and audio podcast to focus on our in person event, which I hope you've had a chance to check out the audio podcast episode with Regine Jackson, who was our guest for the live event in February, which was recorded at the Artist Cafe in downtown Springfield, Massachusetts. Black Writers Read showcases, celebrates, and honors the words, work, and traditions of Black writers from across the country, across genres, across experiences, and across the African diaspora. Black Writers Read is a behind the scenes conversation into the craft and what it means to create as a Black author in today's society. Since starting the series during the summer of 2020, we've hosted close to 50 authors representing various genres, including children's books, young adult fiction, poetry, urban creative nonfiction, memoir, history, horror, essays, food, and culture from around the globe, including Western Massachusetts, Maryland, Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., Seattle, Washington, Florida, upstate New York, New York's Hudson Valley, Vermont, Cambridge, Massachusetts, Chicago, Virginia, Portugal, Costa Rica, and St. Martin. Today, we welcome LaVista Jones, who joins us from Gilbert, Arizona, hence the mountain time mention in the advertising for today's episode. We are adding new genres to our catalog today as LaVista writes books on self-help and business. I am excited to expand the Black Writers Read repertoire in this way. LaVista Jones is the founder and CEO of 31 Marketplace, an agency committed to helping women to do the work they love without sacrificing themselves to do it. As a corporate dropout turned entrepreneur, she is on a mission to challenge women to cultivate their own definition of success and to live life on their own terms. LaVista is a business consultant, professional speaker, host of the Boss Talk, which I love that that's trademarked, and published author. Her latest book, The Boss Shift, which was released in October of 2022, is anchored in implementing her signature framework that focuses on battling overwhelm with systems and self-care. An acronym, BOSS stands for B, prepare for battle, resist the expectation of becoming overworked as the only path for success. O, call out overwhelm, acknowledge the suffocating weight of overwhelm you're currently dealing with. S, optimize systems, leverage efficient and automated systems to do the heavy lifting in your life and business. And S, practice self-care, engage in deeply resonant self-care rituals that nurture your soul. LaVista is an Ohio native and bleeds scarlet and gray. Go Buckeyes. For those who know me, I am a University of Michigan alum. We had a chance to talk about that earlier today, so it's great to kind of come together in this way. She's married to her college sweetheart, Stuart, and they share their home in Arizona with their son, publicly known as the Cub. I love that. To learn more about LaVista and to purchase, which I love that she does this, to purchase an autographed copy of her book, please visit her website at lavistajones.com. That's LaVistaJones.com. As she is reading, I will be showing her ways to find her online, including her website. A burnout survivor and recovering overfunctioner. Again, I want to state this because this is so important. And also, too, I'm really soaking this up because this is like, I'm so glad that this interview is happening now because of the moment of where I am in my life. LaVista's mission is to help women disrupt the hustle and build businesses that are sustainable and nurturing. As I am at a crossroads myself, finishing my dissertation, getting ready to make a significant career change, and seeking to grow the Black Writers Read platform, I am looking forward to learning a lot from LaVista as I shift my own priorities. As many of my conversations with Black Writers Read guests are personal masterclasses. Trust that I have very selfish reasons for having her on today. I hope that everyone who is joining us adapt some of her practices into your own rituals. And of course, buy the book, buy the journal, and also buy the planner that accompanies with it as well. For those who are new to Black Writers Read, here's the format of our show. LaVista will read an excerpt from her work. We will then chat about her book and her work as an author. And if time remains at the end of our conversation, we'll open it up to questions and answers from those who are joining us today. We have viewers joining us from both Facebook and YouTube. If you have a question, please feel free to include it in the comment section on the platform that you are joining us from today. I will compile the questions and either pose them to our guests following our conversation or insert them during an appropriate time. I'd now like to bring Lavista onto the virtual stage. Hello.
Hi, Nicole.
So great to finally have you on.
Oh, I am so excited about our chat today.
Yes. So, question, given that you are in Arizona and I am in,
Yes.
what is the weather like where you are?
I think that we are having literal polar opposites of, weather. The weather here is beautiful. I'm looking out my window right now. It's super sunny, not a cloud in the sky. I'm not sure what the temperature is right now, but I saw that it was going to be like at least mid 70s. Right now, we're experiencing winter really like everybody else, but winter in the desert is a bit different.
Nice. Because
Yeah.
ironically, in this region, within a 20-mile radius, I live in northern Connecticut. It's about 50 degrees outside, no snow on the ground. 20 minutes away in western Massachusetts, where I work, some places have 5 inches of snow, some have
Mm,
2 feet of snow that came a couple of days ago, and it's in the high
yeah.
30s to 40s. And I'm just like, why is the weather so different
So
in just like a
different.
20 and just a
Yeah,
20-minute radius?
yeah. I often get in trouble, right, from my family and friends that are still in Ohio. Like the other day, I was on my way to work out in just, regular workout gear and had posted a picture. And one of my friends was like, "You really going to like sit here in a tank top in our faces and we got like 2 feet of snow?" And I'm like, "My bad. I'm sorry." Like,
Yes.
I was like, it was like mid 80s today. I'm hot. Sorry.
You should be like, come join me, move to Arizona, move to the desert.
Right, right.
So I'm super excited to hear you read. So, Lavista, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Nicole. So, I will be reading today an excerpt from my newest book project, The Boss Shift. And this is the prelude chapter to the book, and it is called It's Complicated When Passion Leads to Burnout. When we equate work we love with not really working, it propagates a belief that if we love it so much, we should do more of it. All of the time, actually. But this mentality leads to burnout, and the impact on our mental health can be profound. My hope is that each one of us has the privilege and opportunity to do work that we deeply care about, with the caveat that we will not neglect to take care of ourselves while doing that work. I truly believe we all have the capacity to fulfill the vision we have for the marketplace and to take care of our visionary selves. When we do both well, our transformational impact is limitless. It's complicated. It feels like a lifetime ago at this point, but I was on the fast track in my corporate career. Your girl went from a 4-month contracted gig to being offered a created just for me assistant vice president position before I reached the age of 30. In hindsight, I partially contribute my success to adopting and implementing the harmful, hustle laced behaviors that so many attribute to success in both corporate and entrepreneurial worlds. I was doing all of the things that I saw modeled by my executive team: the long days, back to back meetings, eating lunch at my desk, if I ate a lunch, traveling all over the country to facilitate audits and training, and the most damaging, maintaining an overbooked schedules. Sometimes I would have 2 or 3 meetings scheduled for the same hour and needed to figure out which meeting I needed to attend and which meetings I'd assign to a proxy. Then I'd assign them the lesser priority meetings, take notes, and then have them tell me everything I was responsible for as a result of those calls. It was ridiculous. During my corporate career, my body kept whispering to me to tell me that that pace that I was keeping was not good. I chose to ignore those whispers. I was young, ambitious, and had convinced myself that I could rest later after I accomplished everything on the horizon that when I wanted to. About 6 years into keeping this pace, I started to notice that I was always tired, the kind of tired that a simple nap wouldn't fix. But I just chalked it up to jet lag. One day I'd be in California, the next day I'd be in North Carolina. I was constantly in different time zones, not sleeping in my own bed, so I didn't really think too much of it. Being on the go all the time was honestly one of the things I loved most about my position. I loved the affirmations and the societal celebrations that came along with being a jet setter. I was away from home so much. My husband often would joke that my salary was actual his spousal support being paid out by the company, and they allowed him to have weekend visitations with me. When I would come home after a long week of traveling, I would fall asleep as soon as I got home from the airport that Friday night, sleep in late on Saturday, spend a little time with my husband once I finally woke up, and then spend most of Sunday doing laundry and preparation to head out of town again on Monday. Those were the typical weekends in the Jones household for close to the first 4 years of our marriage together, not newlywed goals. To put it bluntly, the boundaries in place around my time sucked. I would meet whenever, with whomever, and do whatever necessary to get the job done, even if that meant sleepless nights, which over time became my standard for approaching work. My sense of responsibility to my higher ups, peers, and staff took top priority over my rest and my relationships, including my young marriage. In early 2014, because of reorganization, I found myself reporting to a new senior manager. Now, this was nothing new. In the 7 years I had worked for the company, this had been my sixth manager. So I was accustomed to thriving under hierarchy changes, but this time things would be different. This time, I reported to a woman with whom I am convinced earned her salary based on just how miserable she could make me in my life. The perfect kindling for a quick burn. Around the time of that management change, I started developing these headaches that wouldn't go away no matter how much Tylenol or coffee I threw at them. The steadfastness of the headaches became more of a consistent inconvenience than an actual red flag, though. So I kept telling myself that I was good and pushed through it because I had stuff I needed to do. Eventually, I started getting emotional at work, which is highly uncharacteristic for me in a professional setting. I would get feedback from a peer, nothing malicious, just a suggestion on how to identify a trend differently in a presentation deck or something similar. But for some reason, receiving feedback that I needed to change this or needed to update that will cause me to bawl crying. Not fully aware what was even going on with myself, I started having internal dialogue with myself, like from the Tom Hanks movie, A League of Their Own. There's no crying in business. My many emotional breakdowns would get so bad, I would have to go outside and get myself together enough to be able to come back in and get back to work. Once these breakdowns started, they kept happening more and more frequently as well. Then I started experiencing a strong resistance to leaving my home and actually going into the office. The morning conversations with my husband started sounding like, I can't really explain why, but I cannot go into the office today. Not understanding what was going on with me, he generally would respond with, well, the way our mortgage is set up, you got to go somewhere. All these things were happening as my body was desperately trying to whisper its warning signs to me, and I was just pushing them to the wayside. I didn't really want to acknowledge why I was feeling this way, why my head was hurting, or why I was so tired and emotional. So I kept telling myself I was good and that I could just push through it. While sitting at my desk one day, I realized that I was very aware of my heart beating at a really fast pace. I knew that couldn't be a good thing and was something I shouldn't ignore. The building I worked in had a nurse's station, so I walked over and asked if someone could check me out. After checking my blood pressure, the nurse, darling, are you experiencing some stress at work? Me? No, just my normal work day balance. The nurse, well, your blood pressure is really high. You should monitor it. Me, that's so weird. I don't know why my blood pressure would be high. So, of course, in hindsight, I'm like, come on, Lavista, you are killing yourself slowly working this way. And then this happened. I left my house one morning on my way into work and was on the highway. My palms started sweating, and my heart felt like it was going to beat out of my chest. I started crying. My mind was racing, and so was my pulse. I had no idea what the hell was going on with me. I navigated through rush hour traffic and made it into the office by the grace of God, because once I started feeling this way, the only thing I could remember that happened next was that I was pulling into the garage of my building. After sitting in my car for a few moments, I got myself together enough to walk into the building and find my desk. Then I made 2 phone calls. First, I called my husband and told him I was coming home because I thought, I'm losing my mind. The second call I made was to a local psychologist to be seen that same day because, again, I thought I was losing my mind. I clearly needed to talk to somebody because I felt like I was at a breaking point, and I was. I was fully experiencing burnout. It only took one appointment with the therapist for her to fill out the paperwork to keep me away from work and put me on short term disability. And it took being on short term disability for 6 weeks and going through therapy to fully recognize that I was stressed out, overworked, and overwhelmed, and desperately needed to sit my hips down somewhere and rest. But it was complicated because I really loved the work I was doing. So how could it not be good for me? I think it was an awakening moment when I realized that self-care was very important and that I really needed to figure out how I was going to get more of it. That moment also set me on a redirection path in the marketplace because shortly after being released from short-term disability, I resigned from my corporate position and resumed working with private clients. Similar to the feelings I've shared in this chapter, you probably love the work you do. But without a challenged mindset, systems, and nurturing self care in place, you are sacrificing yourself to do it. And from me to you, it doesn't have to be that way. Before we dive into why a shift is needed, I want to make sure that we're clear on the same page about what a shift is. So, for the context of this book and the entire boss shift framework, implementing a shift requires us to change what we give attention to and the corresponding actions we take. Nobody goes into entrepreneurship wanting to burn out and ultimately resent the business they have invested so much time, energy, and resources into building. I think it's safe to say that most overworked entrepreneurs want to work on their business as the visionaries instead of staying consumed working in their businesses to complete the day to day busy work. However, many still push aside realistic work capacities and take ownership of wearing all of the hats in their business anyway. But busyness isn't business. And sacrificing your well being and relationships in the pursuit of achieving unrealistic expectations isn't life goals. Ask me how I know. The behavior of working myself beyond the point of exhaustion to prove that I was capable and worthy in my past corporate life is the same behavior that I see playing out in the lives of business owners and professionals that I connect with in the marketplace. I recently had the pleasure of interviewing my dear friend and phenomenal coach, Aisha Cogborn, on my podcast, Boss Talk. During her interview, she shared how she herself had to go through the process of unlearning the toxic, hustle laced, and damaging behaviors that had been ingrained in her during her corporate career as she launched into full time entrepreneurship. During our conversation, she offered up this invaluable advice for those knowing that they need a shift. Ask yourself, no matter how much you believe in the vision of your work, how committed are you to it and at what cost? We both agree that if it comes to the expense of your mental well being, physical health, or relationships with the people that you care about most, which should include yourself as well, it may be time to reconsider. You run the risk of resenting your success if you miss too many significant moments or opportunities to engage in the experiences that truly make a life well lived. Because as wonderful as success is on paper, it's more than just the business. So count the cost. And whatever you do, whatever sacrifices you make, and we all make them, just be sure that the cost isn't too high. I know that for both Aisha and myself, burnout was the ultimate cost we both paid for our complicated relationships with work. But what is that burnout phenomenon anyway? What are the warning signs? WHO, the World Health Organization, defines it as a syndrome conceptualized as resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed and is characterized by these three dimensions: feeling of energy depletion or exhaustion, increased mental distance from one's job or feeling of negative and cynicism related to one's job, and reduced professional efficiency. Looking back, there were clear signs that had burnout written all over them as I was building my corporate career. Below are some of the warning signs that I took notice of in hindsight. Running on empty. I simply had nothing else to give. The truth of the matter is that in that season of burnout, even if I wanted to do more for myself, my family, my job, I couldn't. My physical and mental resources were depleted. I was completely tapped out. I lost enjoyment in my life. I lost the ability to enjoy activities and moments that would otherwise find exciting and meaningful. I had trouble focusing. I was so easily distracted and overlooked details. My lack of focus actually increased the amount of work I needed to do because I had problems prioritizing and fully executing on deliverables. If you are greatly experiencing these warning signs, it is time to step back, take a deep breath, and take actions towards making a shift. Embracing the shift. Shifting looks like proactive burnout prevention instead of recovering by resisting the expectation of being overworked as the only path to success. Listen to the whispers. I paid a high price for not listening to the whispers from my body and eventually got hit with a cosmic 2x4. But you do not have to walk a mile in my burnt out shoes. It's not what you say that directs your life, it's the whispers that you listen to that have the power to change your path. Talk it out. If you're dealing, if you're feeling a certain kind of way, go talk to someone. You don't have to wait until you're already in the midst of burnout to seek help. Take proactive steps. In the support of your mental wellness, please contact Dr. Morgan Lucas at Agape Psych Services if you are located in the states of Texas, Ohio, and North Carolina. She is licensed in those 3 states and have privileges to provide telehealth support in 26 others. If you need to find a therapist in another state, I suggest that you go to Psychology Today to search for a clinician in your area. Adapt, a battle cry. When I resigned from my position in corporate America, I resumed work with private clients. I knew I had a calling to work with women entrepreneurs who were overwhelmed with busyness and on their own journey towards burnout. I know how it felt in that place of burnout, and I also know that I cannot stand by and watch other women do that to themselves. I am on a personal mission to help women disrupt the hustle and build businesses that nourish them. That work is anchored in helping them build automated back-end systems and practicing self-care. And that work starts with acknowledging that a shift is needed by adopting a battle cry. And so I introduce to you the Boss Manifesto. These curated affirmations will jumpstart your shift from overwork to implementing self-sustaining boundaries. I am done glorifying busyness. Busyness is not the new chic. It is not business goals or a cause for celebration. I no longer I will no longer be a complacent participant in the unrealistic expectation that sleepless nights, exhaustion, overbooked schedules, and inner turmoil are the only ways to show how capable I am. I am actively cultivating my own culture of work life balance. I am empowered to step back and rest when my body, mind, and spirit whisper for me to do so. Burnout is not my final destination. I am no longer blurring the line between ambition and self endangerment in the name of achieving success. I am defining and achieving success on my own terms. I hold myself to a standard of excellence and grace, not perfection. I ask for and receive help when I need it without shame. I am becoming fluent in self compassion. I am committed to infusing my own well being into the way I live my life and balance my work within it. I declare that the work that I do and the way that I do it will nourish me. I am building systems fortified with self sustaining routines that create moments to breathe. Each day, I give myself permission to use my time, my energy, and my resources to take care of myself simply because I am worth it. And so I am confident that exhaustion, busyness, and burnout aren't part of your life plan. Bottom line, you do not have to stop doing what you love in the marketplace, whether corporately or as an entrepreneur, to have balance and wellness. Whatever your vocational path, you can still benefit and find value in a shift. Thank you, Nicole.
Lavisa, that was Amazing. And I'm so glad that you began including the manifesto. My apologies. I started a coffee fit off
Oh.
camera. Yeah, I'm one of the long haulers with COVID. I got it in September and I've been dealing with
Mm.
coughing and stuff off and on since then.
Oh, COVID, COVID, COVID.
But let's get the conversation started.
Let's go.
So, you kind of allude to this a little bit in your introduction and your prelude to your book, but can you talk about the origin story of the boss shift and like how this book got started?
Yeah, well, I think it starts with Boss itself. Back in 2018, I was part of a networking group. And it was great. It was a great group of women, but as an introvert, networking isn't super easy for me anyway. And so I was going to this group, which is more on like the traditional side of networking. Come, give your 30-second pitch, listen to somebody's, business, and then you exchange a flurry of business cards, and then you go home. And I was just like, I'm not really sure how this is really helping me. Like, I'm not really talking about issues that I'm having. I'm not, being celebrated for, prioritizing myself. I'm not really being vulnerable to share like what I'm struggling with so I can get help. Learning about like your Tupperware business, that's cool, but like I needed something else. And so I actually started Boss Talk, as an in-person networking group for entrepreneur women in the Valley. And so at the time, it was, like Boss Babe, all that stuff was like really kind of like on trend, right? I'm a boss. And so I kind of just adopted that for a while. But I remember I was sitting in a client intensive with a marketing partner of mine. And I just kept thinking about like, I feel like boss means something more. And I just kind of started thinking about the work that I do and how I do it. And it was like, it just kind of like came to me that boss really isn't a person. It's more about an approach, and that approach has evolved into battling overwhelm with systems and self care. And so that really is kind of the origin. And I think once I realized that boss meant more than just like, oh, I'm like this boss out here doing whatever, and it was more of an approach of like how I do work. For myself, how I set those boundaries for myself, and how I coach my clients to do the same is really when it became like a valuable thing for me because it was like, oh, this is really what the marketplace needs.
Nice. And you talked a little bit about this in your response, but why this book at this point in your life? And how did you arrive? Because you alluded to a little bit of both career and personal stuff. How did you arrive at this point in both your professional and personal career to write this book?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So, um, at the core of who I am, I'm a writer. I write like that's just kind of the way that I communicate my soul with the world. And, for at least a couple of years, I would maybe see something on Facebook or, a client would experience, something, and I would just come to my computer and just kinda start writing. And so I started, talking to a friend of mine who happens to be an editor, and I was just like, "I feel like there's a book here." I was like, "But I feel like I'm, like, writing in circles." Like, I'm just sitting in front of my computer and just writing, and, I'll sit down, and it's like the next thing I know, there's, like, 1,700 words here talking about whatever that I'm seeing, like, happening, and she's like, "Okay, let's take a look at it." And so that's kind of where things started, but the real catalyst was, late 2021, a dear friend of mine passed away. And she was an entrepreneur, but she also had a regular 9 to 5 job as well. And she was very much what I would call like a people pleaser, right? She did any and everything that she could for people, whenever she could, even if it was to the detriment of herself. And I remember sitting at her funeral, and there's typically a time where um, they'll allow like friends or family to get up and like, share something about the person that has passed away. And it was like person after person after person would get up and they would be like, she always put other people's needs before her own. she always gave of herself, when she was tired. She did. And I was just like, like every person that got up to speak, like I cringed every time like somebody like said something new. And I was like, you know what? I understand the sentiment of what you're saying, right? I understand you're trying to share something from a good point of view, but it's just like, do you realize that her living that way contributed to her not being here with us anymore? Because my friend suffered a stroke that left her partially paralyzed and really not able to communicate well, and then subsequently had 3 additional strokes. And so then she eventually died from complications of those. And so I met with my editor, who actually was at that funeral as well. She had come in from Texas to attend because, this friend meant a lot to the both of us. And I let her know it's time to write. It is time to gather my thoughts and just share my point of view because, you know, everybody's like, okay, you've got to hustle, you've got to grind, you've got to do that, and you'll get your reward later. And it's like, well, where's my friend's reward? Like she paid the price for living this lifestyle of like going, 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 doing, literally with her life. And I was just like, I can't I can't not get this out. And so then the real writing process started to get the book published.
I didn't realize that one of the main catalysts for this book, excuse me, was due to a friend's sudden passing. May I um, express my deepest condolences? Like,
Mm,
that's really hard.
thank you.
And this goes back to why having this interview during this point is so important. It's Women's History Month. And
Mm,
I, excuse me, allergies, wanted to take an opportunity to really reflect on the feminine identity and the femme identity in terms of, excuse me, how people depend on us, even at the sacrifice of our own selves.
mhm.
And so to even hear the story of your friend and how, she missed out on moments to really enjoy the labors of the hustle, that is really calling a lot to me right now.
Yeah. Because, so many women do that, right? Like I think that we're wired to like nurture and to give. And I think sometimes we're also conditioned to put ourselves at the bottom of, our priority list. Like, oh, I need to do this, for this person. I need to do this for that person. And I'll wait. Like, I'm tired right now, but like I can rest later. I need to do this for myself right now, but like I can do that later. And it's like, does later even ever come? Right? And it's just like we've got to do better at putting ourselves first because we need to be okay, not so that we can go out and take care of other people, but just because we need to be okay, period. And then I think that what we're able to do for others comes from the overflow of how we treat ourselves. And we're able to show up as better mothers and better spouses and better um, friends and better coworkers and better bosses because we are okay.
Thank you for that. This is a great segue into a question. So I typically ask all of my guests questions around their genres
Mhm,
and what it means to embody the genre and write from the genre of your location, particularly as a Black woman author. Self help and business books are very specific forms of nonfiction. For authors, can cite a significant amount of personal experience, trauma, and turmoil that led them to writing their books and using these platforms to offer advice to others, as you do with this book.
mhm.
So, can you talk about your process when writing your books, because you have several others, especially The Boss Shift, and how you ensured making space for self care and self check, and as you explored past facets of your life?
Yeah. So the self checks, I write about it in the book. It's a ritual that I do with myself and have done with myself for a really long time. And I do them on Sundays, and it really is just a simple ritual that I sit with my notebook, right? Like my little notebook that kind of, it's like my business Bible. I've even kept one of these, from the time I was, in corporate. I would just like things that come to my mind, I write them down. But on Sundays in particular, because it's the start of my week, I sit down and I ask myself, like, how are you? And I give myself the space to actually answer that question, right? Like, and listen to the answer that I have. Am I tired? Do I feel overwhelmed? Am I happy? Am I excited about something? Like, how am I, like, really? And then I ask myself, like, what do I need? Right. So, do I need to ask my partner to help me do X, Y, and Z? Do I need to reach out to my friends? Do I need to schedule some, alone time? Because again, as an introvert, I need like that alone time to kind of recharge, like those kind of things. Do I need some sleep? Like, do I need to run away for a couple of days, and just kind of be by myself and then like come back to like my life? Like, what do I need? Um, and then from that, like, who do I need to have conversations with to get those needs met? So maybe it's somebody from my team, maybe it's a friend, whatever the case may be. But I try to like touch base with myself on a regular basis like that, just kind of in general. And so then when I was writing this particular book, one of the things that I did before really getting started was talking to my team and talking to my family and just kind of letting them know, like, hey, like, the writing is about to start. I'm going to need this time, kind of extra time in my office to get the words out, to go through the editing process, everything that needs to happen. And just kind of reassuring everybody, like, this is temporary, like, and kind of even reiterating that for myself, this is temporary, just so that I can get it out and um, get this book done, and finally out there. And so the other thing that I did was I had a friend that was writing a book around the same time. So her book came out that September. Wait, August, September, October. Yeah, September. And then mine came out in October. And so what we would do is we gave each other, free access to each other basically to like when something would come up for us, like a mental block or whatever, we pick up the phone and we call each other. And so I think over the course of writing, both of us quit writing our books at least 30 times. So we would pick up and we're like, I quit. I'm not doing this. Like, F this book. I remember I even got to a place where I was just like, you know what? I've written some stuff. This can go out on my website as a blog. And it's like, this is what would have been chapter 4, but it's out here for you to read. Like, enjoy it. I'm not doing this anymore. And so we would also make sure that we had time to meet up with each other and have dinner. So being out of our offices, being out of our houses, being away from our families, and just having that one-on-one time with somebody else that was going through the exact same process, somebody that knew why we wanted to quit, but also was going to be a cheerleader to tell the other one, like, but you're not though. Like, I understand that this has gotten hard, but the people need your words. The marketplace needs this resource from you. So pull on your big girl panties and, get back to work and let's have some pot stickers and let's cry and get it all out and then encourage each other to go back into the office and get our shit done. Right. And so that was a godsend having my friend Nadia to be able to do that with, because I think that without her, it would have been like, yeah, nobody knows that this is supposed to be coming out. And if, there's no book that appears in October, nobody's going to know. It's just going to be me. And so, having that extra accountability and that support was very helpful as well. And so that's kind of how I, made space for myself to do like those constant check-ins, making sure that I had the time and space that I needed, and prioritize, my care and making sure I had support in place as well.
Nice. Self-help and business are new genres for Black writers read. I'd love for you to talk about writing in these genres as a Black woman author. From my vantage point, it seems like the market is oversaturated with self-help and books on business written by white women and Black men who are of the cloth,
Mhm.
meaning ministers of megachurches.
Yes.
Why do you think it is important for Black women to claim their spaces in the genre? And what makes your voice unique And then what are your goals and mission when writing in these genres?
Well, one, because we're here, right? Black women are doing amazing things in the marketplace corporately, just we just are. And so it's time for our voices to be heard in these spaces. We have amazing business acumen, we have amazing ideas, things, we have a camaraderie right amongst ourselves of like things that we've experienced and for survival, like code switching, for example, right? But that stuff needs to be shared, right? I think about when I was still in corporate or even now as an entrepreneur, seeing younger and not necessarily like chronologically age, but like maybe like a newer entrepreneur or like somebody who's just getting into their corporate career, they're looking ahead to those that, have like come before them. And it's just like, well, what have you done? What are you doing? What are your secrets? Like those kind of things. And it's just like, I think that too often we have like held those things like too close to the chest, part of it for like survival reasons, right? But I know for me personally, I'm not in the corporate space anymore, and so I don't have retaliation to worry about like in that regard. And so I feel like I'm able to speak about things, corporate culture, things like that, that alone, I think, if you have like that experience like you talk about, and it's like, oh, it's known that like you're expected to do more with less, and you're expected to put those hours in, and you're expected to do this, and you're expected to do that, but we're not necessarily bucking the system from within, right? So being in the entrepreneurial world but having that corporate experience, like I feel like I can talk about both, and then bringing in the self-care as well and showing that, hey, these two should be married. That just kind of makes my voice unique in that space. Like, this is not theory. This is not something I learned about in a business book. Like, this is something I literally lived in both the entrepreneurial and corporate world. And here's what I learned. And if, I can keep somebody from hitting their head against the wall because, like, I'm able to share, then that's what I'm going to do.
And then speaking of your unique voice, how did you discover your calling as a writer?
Yeah, Nicole, I think that I have been writing for forever. So, as an introverted um, individual, I would notice like in conversations or whatever, I wouldn't necessarily be the first person to like state an idea or like share something or like a direction that I think we would go in because like um I needed to like marinate and like think about, what was going on and kind of take more information in to be able to give out a valuable like output. And so for a while it was just like, oh, it sounds like the loudest voice in the room or whatever is like whose idea gets heard. And it's just like that's irritating because, I'm not really saying a lot in this meeting. But once I would be able to like, step back, like in a corporate setting, talking one-on-one with like a client, just like in my life in general, relationships, like it's just like, okay, like I've never been like even the type of person to like fight with somebody. It's like I hear what you're saying. I see that we have like a different point of view. And it's like I need to still think about things. And it's like easier for me to express that in writing, right? Like once like my mind is clear, I've got my thoughts together, like whatever. And it's just like, okay, like I can write about it. I feel like better than I can like talk about it. And so that is just kind of how I express my voice. And, it's been that way really through life, through poetry, through short stories. I can remember, I think I was in the fifth grade the first time like something that I wrote got published like in our local paper because I wrote a poem one night just to kind of like how I was feeling about something. And I remember sharing it with my dad the next morning. And he's like, you should show this to your teacher. And so I was like, well, okay. And I remember showing it to my teacher. And, it seemed to be a big enough deal for the adults in my life, like for them to actually send this to the paper. Like, here's like this young student that has written this and they came out and did a story about me and all that stuff. But it's always been the way that I have best expressed myself through writing my words out.
Juggling writing a new book, producing and hosting a podcast, maintaining your business, and managing and loving your family can be a lot, all leading to its own burnout.
Yes.
How did you manage writing your book along with managing all of your other facets of your life without burning yourself out during this process? And what advice would you have to women authors who are also juggling the same responsibilities to make sure that they are able to nurture their next creative venture?
Yeah, so I think, a lot of the safeguards are put in place for myself. We talked about a little earlier, right? With like sitting down with my family and my team, like this is what I need to do. This is, I would block time off in my schedule. So it's like I knew when I was writing. And the thing I think that I would give advice to somebody else, right? That's like wearing all these hats, like motherhood, being a spouse, being, a business owner, or like having this corporate career, position or whatever the case may be. I think is the critical thing is asking for what you need, right? Like don't try and do this in silence. Like don't try and do this while you are wearing your superwoman cape, because that's going to get you in trouble, and it's going to have you be like this emotional mess that's going to like implode because all the stuff is kind of coming at you. You have to be honest with yourself and communicate, those expectations and those needs to the people who are around you, because this is a hard process. Like writing, I think could and is, right, like a full-time job for many people. And so, I couldn't just be like, well, I'm going to go write a book. So I'm not your mother now. I'm not your wife. I'm just going to go in a little cave and just write. And then I'll be back in about 6 months. Like, that's not my reality. Like, I'm not able to do that. And so I really had to be honest with like what I need. And it's just like, you know what? I'm going to be late for dinner, or I'm not cooking dinner today because I need to
Yeah.
write for these 90 minutes. And it's either you're going to cook or we're going to order something out because I can't do both. I can't. I am, going to need to come home right after your baseball game, while you're in the shower, and I need to get back in the office because I have a 90-minute block of writing that I need to do. And I know if I don't do that, it's, that writing is going to potentially bleed into another area of my life where I should be momming or I should be like with a friend. And it's like, then I have this conflict. It's like I had to like stay with my schedule, put those boundaries out, but like had to make sure that I was asking for what I needed every step of the way.
Cool. And then the Boss Shift, the book, is accompanied by the Boss Journal and the
Mhm.
Boss Planner. I was wondering if you could share a prompt from the journal to entice our viewers and listeners to buy all three books as its intended set.
Yeah, so, the manifesto that I read, I have, it framed
Oh,
in different ways,
wow.
and so the journal itself is that manifesto, so it's the artwork of the manifesto on the journal, and so one of the prompts, that I wanna read is, um the first part of the journal you'll notice is the manifesto itself, but it's broken down with prompts and questions for each one of those affirmations that is included in the manifesto itself. And so, one of those affirmations is I am done glorifying busyness. And so, the prompt I wanted to read was why is right now the right time to shift away from the perceived glamour of the hustle? Because I think that, in our society, we see people jet setting and this happening and that happening, which is great. It's some of the things like I have mentioned in the book that like I loved about the career. But if we're not prioritizing ourselves and having good boundaries while we're doing all those things, we run the risk of hurting ourselves and those kind of things. And so that's one of those prompts that really just kind of makes you like sit and think like, hmm, okay. Right? So again, why is right now the time to shift away from the perceived glamour of the hustle?
You've written several books, including Boss Up, Automate the Grind, and Reclaim Your Time, Breathe, Essential Self Care When Life is Suffocating, and Self Ish, a guide to prioritize you and your business. How has your literary voice shifted and grown since you wrote your first book?
Um, I feel less filtered. I think that when
Mm.
I first started writing, I was just like, well, I can't really say this or I shouldn't say that. But to know me is to know that I have a potty mouth. And so if we're on a call or we're in a conversation together on a podcast, like whatever the case may be, like you're probably going to hear an F-bomb, you're probably going to hear, various things. And so part of, the way that I have grown is, not necessarily filtering myself or censoring myself. And the other part of the growth that I have seen personally is being more vulnerable as a writer and really just kind of sharing, like, not just being on like the surface of like, oh yeah, I experienced burnout, but really helping the reader like feel what I was feeling, right? Like, I think that when I'm out speaking or things like that, and I talk about what that panic attack felt like for me on the 202 driving into the office, and I look out, I see like heads like nodding and sometimes tears streaming because they're like, "Oh, yeah, I feel that way." And I think that that's the way that I have started to connect deeper with those that read what I write because I am being vulnerable and really just kind of putting myself out there for the world to see.
Hmm. Then the next question that I have for you, because we're almost wrapping up for the day, I'd love to talk about your brand, which
Mm.
is fierce, especially your photos and the cover of your book, which I wanted to bring up on the screen
Oh.
because it's just so. I hope you don't mind me doing this, but
No, no.
it's beautiful. Oh my gosh.
Thank you.
So, how did you develop your brand, and what advice would you have for other authors who are looking to develop their own brand?
Yes, so I think that, from a work standpoint, like, I think, like, my work stands for itself, and I think that when looking at my brand and how I really want to communicate who I am, it's like, okay, yeah, I can get the work done. I can accomplish like this, and this, but I never want anybody to lose sight of the fact that like I am a woman and I am feminine and I am sexy. And, all of those things are like part of me in addition to being a badass with the work that I do. And so that's what I try to convey with the branding that we have with the business. And for the book in particular, I wanted to be mindful to show the duality of taking care of business, but also taking care of yourself, right? So, like, it was very important for me to like take these pictures in a really, luxe looking bed. I was wearing like really super comfortable pajamas. I've got my wine, I've got my laptop because I didn't and I don't because my message is very clear that like both of those things go together. Like working hard, but taking care of yourself, like those things are married, right? And so it's just like you need to be able to get things done, but you also need to be able to take care of yourself. And so, really worked really hard with my stylist and my photographer to really capture that for the cover. That there's the duality there that needs to be with us all of the time, that you can get stuff done and take care of yourself simultaneously.
There was a question that came in from one of our viewers. I want to give a shout out to Opal Gale, who's a very dear friend of mine and an amazing writer located here in New England. So her question is, are you familiar with the Nat Ministry? It bears a similar Rest as Resistance manifesto. And she wanted to know, what are your thoughts in terms of relating your work to the Nat Ministry?
Yes, so I am familiar with the NAP ministry. I have not read Rest as Resistance yet, but it definitely is on my list to read. I think that a difference in our approach, from what I understand, is that her point of view is, rest is resistance, in that kind of like world of like equity, and really like resisting white supremacy, to rest and to not work yourself, you know, beyond, what you're capable of and, taking your rest and things like that, which I think is a valuable point of view. The work that I do is not necessarily focused around equity or resistance in that fashion. It's more so against hustle culture. So there is some synergy between the two messages, but I think our lenses are a bit different. But it definitely is a read that I want to get done because I think that the work that she does and the movement that she has created is amazing. So yeah, I'm very familiar with her work.
Cool. And then the last question I have for you, Lavista, is what is next for you and how the Black Writers Read community support you on this journey?
Yeah, so I think that the next book is going to be a focus around grief. And there's actually a chapter in the Boss Shift that talks about a very hard time that I went through in my life, through like my motherhood journey. And that was me experiencing 3 miscarriages. And so I think that the next work that I will have coming out is kind of just talking about those moments in your life that feel suffocating, and what it is that you can do to love and care for yourself through those from, again, the lens of a Black woman looking to have some licensed therapists kind of help me give, some points of view for that as well. Things that are maybe more taboo in our society that I just don't think that, that should be, right? Because so many women experience so many hurtful things. And it's like, you know what? We need to give voice to those things because there are so many of us that feel like in those moments, I'm by myself and I'm doing those things alone. And it's just simply not true.
Yes. And Lavista, I want to point out as well that going back to the question that I asked earlier about writing self help and business from the experience and the lens of being a Black woman, because again, we have so many people that are of the so called majority that write for these books and from this experience. And I feel like for us, it's a very different experience because we're writing, our expertise is our personal experience. And a lot of times it's coming from that like trauma in order to get us to the space to be able to help other people. So
Mhm.
I really appreciate the ways in which you are vulnerable and you're very vulnerable in your writing.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes. So this is a question that I just thought of that because I typically send my guests the questions ahead of time. But given all that we've talked about today and just there's so much heaviness in it,
Mhm.
what brings you joy and like what what is a moment of joy for you? I'm curious.
With the writing
With writing and just
and the
everything
work.
in general.
Yeah, so I think that with writing, it's those aha moments that another individual gets after they've read something that I wrote, or those messages that I'll get that, like, you must have written this just for me because these are the thoughts that I'm having. These are the things that I'm going through. So for somebody else to feel seen and heard, and for them to be like, okay, there is something that I can do for myself to treat myself better, to feel better, to do things a little bit differently, and to like for my voice to kind of challenge them, like that lights me up, right? Because it's just like, you know what, you can't unread that, you can't unfeel that deep resonant reaction that you had to something that I wrote. Like, you've got to face it and deal with it, right? And so it's like when individuals reach out and say, hey, uh read what you wrote and you kind of, hit me in the gut with this, or you stepped on my toes, or you did this. And it's just like, great. Like, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to change what it is that you're doing? And not like this huge, cosmic change, but like, what's something tiny that you can do for yourself, like today, to start making a change in your life, to do something different, to show that you are important and worthy of rest and taking care of yourself, regardless of any of these other messages that you are hearing and picking up on. So that brings me immense joy.
Nice. And that's such a great way to close today. So Lavista, thank you so much for joining us today here on Black Writers Read.
Oh, thank you, Nicole, for having me. This has been a pleasure.
Perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and do some wrap up. Black Writers Read will be black. We'll be black. I mean, we're going to be black all the time, but Black Writers Read will be back on March 25th with educator, poet, essayist, creative nonfiction, and fiction author Raina J. Leon to talk about her expansive body of work. Find me and more about Black Writers Read online at NicoleMYoung.com. Be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel to keep up with episodes of both Black Writers Read and my other projects. Also, be sure to subscribe to the audio podcast, which is available on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Thanks to all of our viewers for spending your afternoon with us, and more importantly, for ensuring that Black authors continue to matter. See y'all next week.